Okay, so we are now broadcasting, and let me just check to see if Cynthia. Okay, so Cynthia is now unmuted. Hi,
Thank
Cynthia.
you. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing all right.
Good.
Are you able to see that we have Jane, Mary, people are joining, Monica is here?
I'm not able to see them, but I'm hearing them, I'm sure.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna hang up on my other line.
Yeah, because we're getting an echo. Hi, I'm Olivia.
Okay.
So Stephanie, you're talking, but you muted yourself, so we couldn't hear you.
I just said you have a quorum. Yeah.
Oh, we do?
Yes,
1, 2,
yes.
3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
3, 4, 5. Oh, I'm counting Monica twice. Never mind.
Monica.
Sorry.
Okay, so.
Well, 5 is a quorum, right?
Yes, it's Monica twice.
No.
No, because
I hung up.
Okay.
Mary, Jane, Monica, and Olivia, Cynthia. 5.
Okay. Now I should only be once.
You are just one, with the Bay Bridge in the background for some reason.
That's what I missed.
I'm sorry, Golden Gate Bridge. Golden Gate Bridge.
Nice.
Okay, so please let me know when you would like me to begin roll call.
We haven't heard from Rick or Rick is, I'm assuming Rick is coming, and Ernie.
They should be, Adrian, with their invites. Did they respond to those?
Yes, they did. I can.
Okay, let's give it 1 more minute, and then we'll get started since we have a quorum.
Great.
We have a lot to talk about.
Yeah. All right.
I like your background, Stephanie.
Thank you. It's like
Is that your? Is that
Adrian's in the office. I have
Right,
like
I'm in the office.
Is that the view from the EBC office?
It's
Yes.
my favorite one, but it makes me look very strange sometimes.
yeah. That's the best.
Partially there. How do you do that? Well, we're going to get
It looks
started,
like
but-
space is coming out.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and get it started. So welcome to the Monday, April 20th Community Advisory Committee meeting for EBCE. This is coming through a webinar. I'm going to turn it to Adrian and or Stephanie briefly to talk about the webinar format, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Hi, so we are doing this in a webinar format where all of the panelists are unmuted, but the attendees are muted. You need to have filled out a speaker form a half hour prior to the meeting, and you can raise your hand if you have already filled out the speaker form, and Stephanie will call on you during the public comment or during the question and answer period after the agenda item. With that, I can go to roll call.
Thank you.
Okay. Member Eldridge?
Present.
Member French?
Present.
Laundry?
Present.
O'Connell? Excused. Pacheco? Excused. Padilla?
Present.
Thomas is excused, and Chair Sutter.
Present.
We have a quorum. We go to public comment.
Great, thank you. So as usual, this item is reserved for people who want to talk to us about anything that's not on our agenda. I heard prior to this that we actually have no speaker slips for item C2. Is that still correct, Adrian?
It
Yes,
is correct.
yes.
Okay. So we're going to move on to item C3, which is the approval of minutes from the February 18th meeting. And do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? No? So hearing no discussion, I'm going to assume that the minutes are approved as written. Everybody in agreement, say, yep, I'm hearing nods.
Yeah.
Okay. Cynthia, any comments from you? Or
No.
do you agree to approve?
Yes, I do.
Okay, minutes are approved. We're going to move on to item C4, which is the chair report. I only have one item to bring up to everybody today, and that is I have been in contact with JP. As you know, one of the items in the COVID relief that EBCE is doing is putting another $300,000 towards community grants. That information and how they're getting that out there has not yet been fully fleshed out, but I wanted to let folks know that we will be asking for a CAC member participation once they have this evaluation for the community grants ready to go, and we would be asking somebody to participate in that particular effort. I think this is what, Jane, you did previously.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So no funds have been dispersed yet, is that correct?
Correct. Right. They're busy getting the other money that they're putting out via COVID for the COVID-19 relief is what JP was telling me. So they are planning to include us in this, and at the point that they are ready to start evaluating the items that come in, I'll be reaching out to you, or JP will be reaching out to you to see if anybody's interested. I think Rick is now on, at least I see him here, but he is muted. Rick, can you unmute yourself and let us know if you're here?
I am here.
Great. So let the record show that Rick is O'Connell is here, and we have a Vanessa Gerber. Is that you, Ernie?
She's staff, so she may be presenting, so I just promoted her over.
I see. Okay, I didn't know who that was. Thank you. Okay, so we are moving on to item C5, which is the power content procurement floor item. This is an action item for us as the CAC in the sense that we want to hear from staff in terms of this particular item and take back to the board on Wednesday a recommendation from or the CAC advice about accepting this proposal or not. I don't know who's speaking for staff. I see Todd is on and Nick is on and Vanessa is on. Who will be speaking towards this for us?
I think Nick will.
Okay. So are you going to be having the presentation showing, Adrian?
Yes.
During your presentation? Okay. Great, thanks. Nick, go ahead and take it away if you're going to be talking. You're still on mute.
How about that? How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
So I'm going to give an overview, and then I'm actually going to pass it to Vanessa, who is the staff lead on this item, to kind of walk through the specific slides. So can we go to the first slide, please? Can we advance the slides, Adrian?
We're on slide 3 now, Nick. I think you might be lagging. Do you want you want slide 2 that has the overview?
The overview slide, yes. Overview slide,
Yep.
please.
So we're now on the overview slide.
Okay, great.
We'll find them.
So I'm going to kind of give the overview, and then I'll let Vanessa take it from here. So when EBC, prior to EBC launching, we set a power content at 85% carbon free. That 85% was meant to achieve our goal of being cleaner than PG&E with some buffer. And we have maintained that in 2018 and 2019. As the power procurement landscape has changed, both as it relates to PG&E's power content, but also the way power content compares to PG&E for CCA. Staff has been evaluating, are there better ways to characterize our power content relative to PG&E, and also achieve our goal of having the most cost-effective resource portfolio possible in light of the increasing PCIA that we're seeing, and now the economic recession that we're not fully able to quantify, but we know is going to have some fairly significant effects on the agency's finances. So with that in mind, and really in the context of the allocation from PG&E, staff is proposing that we transition away from a point of comparison where we look at EBC's total carbon-free content and compare that to kind of a forecast value for what PG&E's power content is going to be, and really instead focus on comparing ourselves to PG&E on the basis of how much renewable energy we purchase versus how much renewable energy is forecast to be in PG&E's mix. I think part of the rationale here is that by focusing on being more renewable than PG&E, we're not only beating them on the source of clean energy that is most important, which is renewables, because those are the things that we're procuring and we're buying more of, but we're also positioning ourselves to be to kind of move up and down as allocations move up and down. So to the degree that we accept the hydro allocation or the nuclear allocation, we would have expected parity in the quantity of large hydro we have and PG&E has, if we accept hydro, and the quantity of nuclear if we accept between our portfolio and PG&E's portfolio if we accept the nuclear. And so in that way, our total carbon content should be roughly 5% higher than PG&E's in any given year, while our renewables are 5% by mandate higher than PG&E's. So that's the staff proposal. I think this has the added effect of achieving for forecast calendar year in excess of $11 million of procurement savings. So Vanessa, why don't you take over?
Thanks. Adrian, if we can go to the next slide, please. I'll just walk through, how we, what the baseline is for this comparison. So this is, the current policy, as Nick highlighted, for Bright Choice Power is RPS compliance plus 5%. So for 2020, that's 33 plus 5 is 38%, as well as the remainder of an 85% product portfolio being carbon free. So large hydro ACS. This proposed policy, as Nick highlighted, would be the forecast for PG&E plus 5%, and that 5% is a buffer, best good faith effort to be cleaner than, more renewable than PG&E, with the carbon free from the allocation, depending on what that decision is, tracking with PG&E, following the logic of more renewable, same carbon free equals cleaner than PG&E. So being able to still move forward, provide our value proposition there. Of course, it's challenging to forecast PG&E's load. and they file pretty much not necessarily every July, but last year was July. It's typically kind of in the anywhere from kind of May to August timeframe. Renewables bundled RPS energy sales solicitation, where they have the actuals up until the year prior, and then forecast for the year of the report about 15 years. So the last report was July of 2019. Much of 2020 forward is redacted, as is common. And so we use that latest full year of actuals from PG&E as our proxy for the following year. So in 2019, it was 34.5%. So plus 5% for 2020 for EBCE's Bright Choice Renewables, 39.5. So that's the renewables comparison policy, where no incremental carbon-free would be purchased by EBCE. It would only be received through the decided allocation by the board. And of course, given the context of budget, we would always be seeking to have a higher carbon-free content. That would be in the context of budget and board direction. And this or applies only to Bright Choice. There'd be no power content changes for Brilliant 100 or Renewable 100. Adrian, if you can go to the next slide, please. So for Bright Choice, this would mean procurement savings of a little over $1 million. And that is a direct translation of the carbon-free energy that EBC would not be purchasing in the market, as we would only be purchasing renewables for Bright Choice, with the remainder of carbon-free coming from the allocation decision. Of course, this would still be, yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Well, Vanessa, I thought you said $1 million, but I'm seeing 11. Maybe
Yeah,
I misheard.
11 million.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And that'll be repeated in the slides to come with the different scenarios. Yeah, 11, quite significant. So, this is still in compliance with RPS. It's likely to actually be more renewable than the current policy. The only way in which it would ever be the same as the current policy is if PG&E is projected to have exactly RPS compliance, which is probably not going to be the case. So this will likely result in a higher renewable content for Bright Choice. But it is possible that, this 5% buffer could result in a year in which, the proxy forecast that we use for PG&E is not what they actually ended up, having on their power content label, but there is a reporting lag. So that's why we think that a 5% buffer is a good buffer for this to very likely, stay ahead of PG&E. And then for carbon-free, for Bright Choice will get its EBCE share of whatever allocation is approved by the board, and therefore that should track with PG&E as well. And so the Bright Choice carbon-free percentage will decrease for these years, as will be outlined in the following slides. But comparing ourselves to PG&E on a like-for-like resource basis, again, that's renewables plus whatever accepted carbon-free allocations we receive, we should remain cleaner than PG&E. Move to the next slide, please. Hopefully you'll get more specific. So we have this highlight slide, and then we'll go through the next three, kind of have a bit of an anecdote for what the different scenarios mean and how we kind of arrive at those numbers. I just want to highlight the notes here. Again, this first star on the PG&E renewables, that's just referencing where we sourced that from. And that's the baseline there for adding 5% buffer. That's how we get to 39.5% in that second column for EBCE's renewables under the new guidelines. And then the two stars there referencing PG&E's allocations. We arrived at those numbers from taking an average of PG&E's large hydro and nuclear percentages on their power content labels from 2013 to 2017, as a solid 5-year average of pre-CCA kind of large load departure as you know, an estimate of what their large hydro nuclear power content percentages will likely return to after the application process. Because it's a pro rata share, they should be retaining about the same that they had prior to CCAs on a percentage basis. And then just do want to highlight that this is representative of, you know, an illustrative full year. So these percentages are based on a full year. So if we can go to the next slide, I think it'll be helpful to kind of specifically highlight what each of these are. So we'll go through the 3 slides, and then that'll be the kind of the presentation here. So this is the new guideline scenario, which just shows the renewables percentage being 5% higher than the forecast PG&E, and then the carbon-free percentages tracking with PG&E. And so, as you can see, with the carbon-free total percentages, either with or without nuclear, this decision is ultimately, you know, it results in the same savings because EBC will only have carbon-free from the PG&E allocations and will not be purchasing that. So that's where those savings come from. It's the amount that we otherwise would be spending to achieve 85%, minus a little bit more that we're spending for a little bit more renewables. But you'll see that for the same savings for right choice, there's a potentially large difference in carbon-free, but that is, should this policy be approved by the board, is ultimately, you know, the decision for the allocation there. And so if we move to the next, kind of go to the next scenario here. If the board does not approve this policy and rather maintains the 85% carbon-free target for Bright Choice, there could still be about $8.6 million in savings for Bright Choice procurement if the nuclear is accepted. Meaning we'd still have to purchase 12.9% of the Bright Choice product portfolio in additional large hydro, which is would result in less savings. So that's the difference here. And then if we go to the next slide, please. That's just the final scenario, maintaining 85%. So this policy is not approved. And only hydro is accepted. We'd basically, whatever the hydro volume is, would have to purchase that same volume in large hydro in the market, resulting in fewer savings. So then the next slide is just kind of how we got to those numbers for reference. Hopefully you have that as well from the agenda packet. That's the summation of this item. Open to questions or just back to you, Mary, for committee discussion.
I would like to put this out to the public first before the committee discusses. I've heard that we actually have a couple folks who have put in to talk about this. Adrian?
Yes. We have a hand up from Barbara Stebbins. Allow her to talk.
Great, thank you. Barbara? She still looks like she's muted from here.
Hold on one second. She's not unmuting.
If she's on the phone, she should try *6. I don't know if she is. I can't see that.
I'm trying to unmute her. Hold on one second.
Barbara, if you can hear us and if you can
Yeah,
hit
I'm
star
not.
6. No? Not working? If you're on the phone. I don't know if you're on the phone or on your computer, Barbara.
Computer and your laptop itself is unmuted, you might have to scroll over the top of the actual Zoom bar and unmute that, which you will be entered in as a default mute. So you will actually have to move your cursor across your screen to unmute the microphone on the Zoom call itself.
I temporarily added her as a panelist so she can speak, and then I'll demote her back down after she's done speaking. Maybe that'll help.
Okay. I don't see her as a panelist quite yet.
Yeah.
And she's still looking like she's up there.
While we
Hi,
do
Barbara.
that,
We should be able to hear you. Barbara?
Mm-hmm.
I actually don't see a little
yeah, let's see if you can.
microphone or phone.
I don't see anything.
Barbara.
next to the name in the-
While we try to troubleshoot
Uh,
her, should we go to Al or Audrey? They also have speaker cards.
Yeah. Barbara, we're going to try and come back to you. So Al, I think you have been unmuted.
I think so. It's really tough to figure this out because I couldn't even find out how to unmute. So I imagine Barbara's got the same kind of problem. Anyway,
Well, we were supposed to be able to unmute you, so that it was supposed to be on us to be able to unmute you, but we're still
Yeah,
working on that. So please,
yeah,
please talk, Al.
the little icon where you can mute or unmute didn't show, I guess, until maybe you call on us. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I don't know what
Go for it,
happened.
Al.
Oh, now all I have is a big screen that says how much time I have to say a few things.
That's it.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know what to say about this. We just got this a couple days ago. That chart with all the columns and whatnot is about as indecipherable as anything I've seen before. What I hear from it mostly is that it all presumes, you know, this allocation, this carbon-free allocation to buy this energy from PG&E at reduced price and whatnot, and it's extremely convoluted. It's unclear to me what the urgency is of this issue. We have, you know, as folks in the East Bay Clean Power Alliance always said that the purpose of East Bay Community Energy is not only more renewables, but local renewables. And so in terms of a policy change, I don't know. It means that that the current policy isn't about more renewables, but the whole program was founded on the basis, you know, of more local renewables, real local renewables. I can't understand really what's being put forward here and all the cost estimates, where they come from, exactly how they're calculated, what assumptions are being made about the market. I think it's extremely convoluted and unclear what the major thrust is. Yes, we should do better on renewables and PG&E, but this is all getting integrated with this whole PG&E allotment issue, the advice letter, the nuclear, the large hydro, all things that haven't even been decided upon yet at all. So it really looks like some kind of a way of trying to push the nuclear, buying nuclear from PG&E under the cover of more renewables. And, you know, I really think that's pretty objectionable. The first thing to do logically, you know, would be to decide what the policy of East Bay Community Energy is around this purchase of carbon-free content from PG&E. And then based on that, to come back to this question. I think the reasonable thing to do is to to advocate that this not be a decision, a decision at the board meeting. Nobody knows what it's about and why it's such an important thing to do right now. And it's so dependent on the whole acceptance of PG&E's offer under the advice letter that I really think it needs to be postponed until we have clarity about the other issue that's actually after this in the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like I'm out of time.
Thank you, Al. Mary, we can't hear you now.
Yes, sorry. I put myself on mute because I was typing. Barbara got kicked off. I heard she's back. Barbara, can you hear us and can you say anything?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Please
Yes.
go.
Great, okay. So I think Al was explaining that while we support the concept of a focus on renewables because they are the only long-term sustainable resources and because they're the only ones that can be developed locally, we have many objections to this proposal being put forth here. I'll try and point out things different from what Al said. For instance, that Bright Choice is the most popular choice amongst EBCE customers, and to make a major policy decision when the public has had almost no notice, because all the notice we had was as of Friday that this was going to come out, and in fact spent quite a bit of time over the weekend trying to understand what it was all about because it's quite we think this represents a major policy shift and should not be made, that decision should not be made during a pandemic with very limited public participation and ability to even know that this is happening. It also is clear that this is all falling on Bright Choice. Bright Choice is the lowest price. That means it basically is the one that is going to be the only choice for low income people. And what it will mean ultimately is a dirtier mix for low income people. So it's very discriminatory. We consider it very discriminatory. The 11.3 million is clearly misleading. That's for a whole year. We don't have a whole year, we would have a half year. So keep that in mind. Let's see, and one of the real problems is there's no budgetary context for why these are the choices being offered. There are clearly other choices. We need to know kind of what's the trade-off between renewables and carbon-free. How much is it that we pay extra for carbon-free? How much is it that we pay for renewables? We need to understand those things. The other thing to realize is that PG&E may be able to become more renewable if they have less nuclear that they have to deal with. Right now, they are limited in the amount of renewable they can take because they take the nuclear because nobody else wants it. So they would be, as of this year, they will probably be at 61.9% nuclear unless all of the CCAs wind up taking nuclear off their hands. So that's a big problem too. So those are the main problems that I wanted to raise on this issue. I hope that this group will decide not to support this proposal, or at least to say it needs more discussion. It needs to be a discussion item first and then go to a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Do we have any other speakers on this?
Yes.
Just, I think you had unmuted Audrey. Do we have Audrey as a speaker on this as well?
Can you?
Okay.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Thank you, Audrey.
Okay, great. There's not that much to add to Al and Barbara's statement. My basic question was, which I sent in as a message, was why do we have to have this very formal floor established. What strikes me is that for Bright Choice, nuclear is being introduced where it didn't exist before. And all of this is strikes me. It strikes me that staff wants to make this introduction of nuclear more palatable to the many people who object to nuclear in our power mix. So it's like a diversionary tactic. But that's what it seems to be at first blush. So I support very much, much more discussion about this issue and really focusing on the merits of whether to accept the nuclear allotment before anything else is done. I think the staff statement was that this is independent of whether we accept the allotment or not, but obviously they go hand in hand. That issue is overshadows this. So that's my 2 cents. I would like more discussion and lengthier, fuller discussion. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Audrey. Adrian, Stephanie, do we have any other speakers? Hearing none, I'm going to open it up to.
Pardon me, I'm looking through. We have Jessica, and then I see one hand. Mark, if you can hear us, can you please complete the speaker form so that we can call on you? He has his hand raised, but has not completed the speaker form. But I can unmute Jessica now.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, this is Jessica here. Hi, everyone. I just want to, in very short and sweet, I do not like the idea of creating this dynamic of kind of sticking it to the lowest product, the default product of Bright Choice. First of all, we should not be considering nuclear. We haven't even determined yet if that's what we are doing. Clearly, there's a lot of opposition to it. So to have this discussion is premature, but it is very insulting to say that you would add nuclear energy only to the mix of the most affordable product that EBCE offers. It's insult to injury. As an environmental justice organizer and person who's been impacted by dirty energy, you are literally perpetuating the same discrimination that created these dynamics in our system. East Bay Community Energy should not be participating in that. Clean energy should be accessible to everyone in a way that is equitable. This is not at all equity in our community. And this is absolutely gross. So that's all I want to say. And I want to echo what Barbara, Al, and Audrey have said.
Thank you, Jessica. We have Mark, perhaps? Stephanie, how easy is it for somebody to actually fill this thing out on the fly?
Very easy. There it goes. He just filled it out. So we have.
I hope I'm on.
Yes.
Harry,
so
raise
we
your
were
hand.
set.
Okay.
And you're ready, Mark. Go for it.
Thank you very much. I'm a neophyte to this whole thing. I don't understand. But notice how you guys are handing out some money, which caused me then to scratch my head and say, why am I here? I looked at the slide number 5, and it talked about carbon-free percentage without nuclear, and it shows 85% if you do nothing, which drops down to 50.3% if you change. I thought we all wanted to get to 100% carbon-free as quickly as possible, so I don't understand why you're dropping this. It looks like there's a little about $8.5 million for whatever the timeline is. And my second question is you're saving some money. Where's the money savings go? So two questions. Why drop down 35% in the carbon free portfolio? And then what goes with the money that you're going to be saving out of this thing? And if that can be answered tonight, if not, then perhaps it can be answered on Wednesday night. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mark. I would like to, if we have no other public, hearing none, I'm going to open it up to the CAC. And folks on the CAC, Adrian, can you make it so, yeah, so I can see the participants again? I can do it from here. I would like us to raise your hand, except for, obviously, Cynthia, you're on the phone. You can hit *9 to raise your hand, or you can just kind of break in at any point if you want to say something. But I would like to hear from the CAC. I would like to be able to provide some sort of advice back to the board on Wednesday. Okay, Monica, I can see you visually, so that'll work. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand virtually. I don't have a raise my hand.
It's down on the
virtually.
bottom. You have to see participants. You open up participants, and then it's down at the bottom right. It says raise hand, but that's okay. I saw you. So it'll be Monica and then Olivia.
Oh, I still don't see that. Huh. Yep, don't have it. Well, okay, so I had a few questions for staff. Just to clarify, this is only for 2020, is that correct?
Would you like us to answer the questions?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Nick, go for it.
So this is for 2020. And I think as Vanessa noted, this is a floor for procurement. So, thereafter, in 2021 and beyond, at board direction and, based on the financial circumstances, we would seek to procure above these levels. But so, in principle, this could continue into the future as well.
Okay. And then the second was a clarification. I think somebody else raised it as well. Maybe it was Barb. The $11.3 million that you estimate in savings is basically the avoided purchases that you would make for large hydro. Are those $11.3 million for all of 2020 or just until, if you were to get the allocation or allocations through the end of the calendar year? So what time period does that 11.3 million cover?
It covers it covers a calendar year, or in our case, so we looked at it over the course of a fiscal year.
Okay, so what is your fiscal year again? That ends in
July to June.
July to June. So it's a 12-month savings regardless.
Yes.
Okay. And then I had the similar question as well. If this got approved by the board, and I guess depending on what is decided in terms of taking the nuclear or not taking the nuclear, where would the savings be directed? What would you do with the money?
So at our last regular meeting, so not our March meeting, but our February meeting, and then in our January meeting, for a number of meetings now, I would say, we've been highlighting the expected deficit that we are forecasting as a result of the increase in the PCIA. At our last presentation on this, we were forecasting a deficit, in the $30 million range. That's a deficit of, $30 million less revenue than, our revenues would be $30 million less than our expenses.
Mm-hmm.
So these cost savings would go towards bridging the gap to ensure that we don't, or to reduce our deficit.
So reduce the deficit and avoid possibly losing the value proposition against PG&E as well?
So it would offset the need to change the value proposition. It would offset the need to draw from reserves that we're building to move towards a credit rating. and hopefully position ourselves to be able to operate at as close to cost parity as possible.
Okay. Yeah, those are my only questions for now, Mary.
Great, thank you, Monica. Anna Olivia?
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate staff's report on this. I'm seeing kind of two different issues that are being presented together, and so for clarity, I'm going to kind of pull them out. If I'm misunderstanding them, please correct me. The first one is looking at a comparison style. So are we comparing greenhouse gas free or carbon free, I guess, energy, or are we comparing renewables? That seems like one issue, and the other one is whether or not, assuming that the allocation is made, because this presentation assumes the allocation is accepted, that whether or not to put that all in Bright Choice. So I'm just going to kind of separate those two real quick because there's different things on those things. So looking first at the comparison style, I really would like to support staff in saying that comparing renewables is a really good idea. And as was mentioned in the past, definitely highlighting greenhouse gas free if we don't accept the allocation, and calling out which part of theirs is nuclear and which is the rest of it, because I do believe that will make a difference in how that is viewed on our content label. Also, I also have reviewed the reports from 2008 through December 31st, 2019, but I went through the 10Ks to look at a whole variety of things. And it's possible that staff should at least look at whether it would also be useful in the comparison of renewables to look at not just their percentage, but the actual kilowatt hour production and its change over time, because their peak was in 2016, and since then their renewable production has dropped from well over 22,000 to now around 10,500 a year. So that is a really substantial drop in their renewable production. And so that might be another way to help highlight the real changes that we're making, especially if it's over time, because ours will be increasing. Whereas even if their percentage increases, their actual energy, renewable energy is decreasing. Then to just move into the other one around, well, actually, sorry, I had clarifications on the first one. Vanessa, thank you so much for being here and for that presentation. I'm hoping that we can get a little bit of clarity. Just to follow up on Monica's statement, Nick, you said it's 12 months, calendar year, fiscal year, July to June. Which 12-month period is that 11 million for?
We looked at it in the context of our fiscal year, so July to June. So July of 2020 to June of 2021.
Thank you. Okay, and that does address a pretty big concern. And then if we look at, if we go back to slide, well, slides 5 through 8, any one of them will work just fine. Is there a way to pull that up again, please?
Just a moment.
Thanks.
Okay, we're on slide 5.
Thank you. And I'm correct in that 5 to 8 were the same, just highlighting different boxes, right?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So there were a couple things here. Vanessa, you said that you'd reached these numbers by evaluating the average between something in 2017, 2013 to 2017, something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's in Appendix A, which is the final slide, just to highlight that math.
Right.
Yep.
So I'm curious why that would be taken as an assumption for return to normal. Like if you look at the, so 2016 was when the, when CCA started entering, when the plan for Diablo to go offline happened, when that decision was issued, and when all that started taking effect. And so if you look at the percentage makeup of PG&E's energy, since then, it isn't following that prior 5-year span at all. And in fact, their procurement this year was at 100, or 2019 through, according to their reports, the reporting was, they were at 145% or a little bit more than that procurement for the year. And I just don't remember, I'd have to look up their 10K again, but the percentage makeup, like they've gotten rid of all of their natural gas, they've cut the renewables by half, that's expected to go down farther this year. Why would the assumption be made that through 2025 that it would go back to how it was before? I just don't understand that.
Yeah, the logic there is that, I mean, sure, any 1 year, you know, in power production, with particularly with renewables, it's really hard to take 1 year and say that's indicative. So we wanted to take an average of the 5 years preceding a large load departure for CCAs to say this is what PG&E's mix, including their large generating assets, including nuclear and large hydro, to get a percentage of what that breakdown is likely to return to. Not to say that it's specifically going to be, you know, to the 10th percentage here, but a proxy of what PG&E's relative resource percentage is on the power content. Should the allocations be dispersed to all the CCAs, that their pro rata share should return to what it was when all of those CCA customers were PG&E customers.
So that assumption that they will return to those numbers is based on CCA's taking, because the pro rata share is just going to be split up between the CCAs that take it potentially, because that offer still hasn't been made, so we're not actually clear what that'll look like yet. But that is the assumption that either enough of them take it, or one agency gets dumped with all of it, and they're able to go back to the percentages that was before. I would be happy to share with you the graphs that I've made, looking at that period over a 10-year span, which was what was requested of me by staff at the last meeting, or in February. And so I have completed that analysis and would be happy to share that with you, because my numbers and all of the people that I've spoken with do not share that base assumption that that percentage would go back, unless in fact PG&E could get rid of all of their nuclear and not. That's I don't, this is
let me maybe just interject in terms of, you know, how we got to the 10.8 and the 23.3. So what we were trying to get was, what is the expected annual output on an, you know, average? So we took a 5-year average, and because we took the 5-year period before significant load departure, so that gives you a sense of, if you were to allocate hydro over a 5-year period, PG&E were to allocate all of its hydro to all of the CCAs on a pro rata basis, we should end up all having 10.8% of our mixed hydro. PG&E's mix will be 10.8% hydro, and the CCA's mix will be 10.8% hydro. Similar to nuclear, it's predicated on everyone accepting the allocation. Obviously, we don't know exactly if EBCE will accept the allocation. We do know some CCAs have accepted it and some CCAs have not accepted it. So this is based on a set of assumptions, just to give sort of an apples to apples comparison of what our power content would look like relative to PG&E's under this allocation scenario, where we're focusing on renewables, and then we're sort of assuming in general that our large hydro will be the same as their large hydro. And so far, we know of no CCA that has not accepted the large hydro allocation. So we feel like that's, a fairly accurate assessment of how things are going to go. For nuclear, there are some CCAs that have not accepted the allocation. So, maybe these values will be slightly different, but not knowing that, we're trying to create sort of as straightforward analysis as possible.
Thank you for that. I would be interested in taking a closer look at that math after this meeting. We don't need to take up any more time here from it, but especially since we don't know what that is yet, the 5-year base period, I'm having a little bit of issue with. And then if you could go forward in the slides until it shows probably this one. Well, the question, so the idea around the savings was presented like it's highest if you put all of the nuclear energy in Bright Choice, because we don't have to procure energy then. And we don't have to procure carbon-free energy because we can just use the allocation for our label. Where is the actual energy?
So I think one thing is that we're not assuming that the allocation of nuclear only goes to Bright Choice or the allocation of hydro only goes to Bright Choice. The allocations flow through to Bright Choice and Brilliant 100 on a percentage of load basis. So if 15% of the load is Brilliant 100, they get an allocation of 15%. So I just want to clarify that because there was a statement made that all the nuclear and all the large hydro allocations were going just to Bright Choice. That's not the case. They should have the same ratios.
But yeah, but I mean, only because we can't separate molecules, but you could market it so that don't you worry if you don't want nuclear, you can still get
certainly you could, but that's not what that staff is not proposing that.
Right. Which is not actually the question I asked. The question I asked is where is the energy? Okay. Where does that energy, because you still have to get the energy.
Where does the energy come
where
from?
Where is that coming
nuclear?
From? Well, because we've been told repeatedly that we're not getting nuclear energy. We're just adding this thing to the power content label. So where is that energy coming from?
I mean, physically, we take energy, the way it works is all energy is liquidated into the CAISO market, and associated with the liquidation of the CAISO market are tags to the degree that it's a renewable or large hydro or nuclear. And then when you take power out, you would take the tag with it. So it's being liquidated into the CAISO, and the tag is being delivered to the EBC. There's not a physical nuclear being sort of directed to EBC. All energy sinks in the central market.
So we are taking, okay. And the final clarification is just as a follow-up to that. So if instead of applying this to the carbon-free energy that we already have, and we applied it to, say, some of the brown power, would we still be saving money here, or would that become neutral? Like, could we use it to displace natural gas?
Yeah. We would be, to the degree that you are incrementally buying more on top of the allocation, then you are taking less natural gas. And if you are not taking the allocation and you are not buying, carbon free, then you're taking more natural gas. And that's the point that, your mix gets cleaner or dirtier based on how much of the allocation that you take.
Yeah, sorry, let me clarify the question. So if instead of using the nuclear or large hydro to displace carbon-free resources that we're already purchasing, could we use it to displace natural gas resources that we're using and still achieve cost savings, even if it were less?
Yes, you would have less cost savings if you were to use the allocation for to displace natural gas, so above 85%, you would have well, in one way, if you're not displacing a purchase, there are no cost savings. So using the allocation to go from 85 to 90 or 95 or 100%, there are no cost savings, it's just reductions in your power content label. The cost savings come from displacement of a purchase.
Okay, up and coming.
Okay. All right. It feels very strange to have this agenda item, this part of it, happen prior to the other agenda item where we're talking about whether or not to take it, because the second part of this item is really talking about what do we do with it when we take it. And so I guess I would like to separate these two and say I really support staff's concept of really highlighting the comparison of renewables. Again, sending the recommendation to at least take a look and see if that percentage change over time or the actual kilowatt hours produced change is also a helpful figure to put forward, because I think that could highlight the really good work that we're doing here, and to separate out whether or not to put it in Bright Choice, not only prior to the decision of even making it being accepted, holding that discussion first feels a little leading, but also as this is an item that has been discussed at a previous board meeting, and in that board meeting, it was felt that that was not a good avenue to examine because of the equity issues, as well as, I believe the, gosh, I would have to review that meeting, but I believe there was some question of legal implication of our mandate for equal service to all rate classes. Like that, as that question came up, staff did not pursue that direction. So having this be properly noticed and discussed and all those kinds of things as a separate issue would feel a lot better. But I do, and for so many reasons, but I do support the concept, that first part of comparing by renewables, and really would like that second part removed. That's the end of my questions.
Okay, so we have, we have another contentious item that is still on the agenda, but I would like to hear from any of the other CAC, Rick or Cynthia or Jane.
I can go next if.
Thank
if
you.
That's,
yeah,
yes.
go for
okay. So my comments will not be as lengthy. So I am, well, first of all, I don't know if I have any authority to say this, Mary, but I am going to say it. I would prefer that this be an informational item and not an action item. I think this item needs more discussion in light of the pandemic, and I know that this probably has been referenced before, but it appears through everyone's comments, including the public, that more discussion on this item needs to be had. Secondly, I am not in favor of the change in the power content procurement floor. I would like to see at this juncture Bright Choice to remain at 85% carbon free, and I still remain opposed to the inclusion of nuclear energy in both Bright Choice and any other allocation in Brilliant 100. Philosophically, I think the inclusion of nuclear energy, in all due respect, goes against the vision and principles of community choice. And those are my-
Cynthia?
Yes.
Thank you. Can I ask you a clarifying question?
Sure.
You had indicated that you prefer this to be an informational item and not an action item. Is that for the Wednesday board meeting? You would prefer that the board not take action on them, that you would prefer that the board just discussed it? Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Jane or Rick?
Can figure out, there we go. I can go next. I have a question about this 11.3 million, and I'm wondering what is the percentage, what percentage does that represent of the overall procurement spend?
Yeah, so from our overall procurement spend, I think in our February meeting, we referenced a $30 million deficit. So an overall procurement spend of, and these numbers are being refined further as we go into the context of our budget setting, but an overall procurement spend of $390 million. Of that, roughly 360 million are energy procurement spend. So this would be a roughly 3% reduction in your energy procurement cost.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And well, two questions then. Where, like, assuming that we take the allocation and we realize this 11.3 million in savings, where would the other 20 million come from for that deficit?
So I think one thing, just to your point about taking the allocation, if the board were to approve the updates to the power content guidelines, the savings accrue to the agency irrespective of whether or not the agency accepts the allocation. So because we're comparing ourselves on the basis of renewables, so PG&E's forecast is 34.5, then our goal would be 39.5. We would procure 39.5% renewables. We would not go and incrementally procure any large hydro. The large hydro, and to the degree that we accept the nuclear allocation in our mix, would come from the allocation. So our power content would be a reflection of renewables that we buy and anything we accept in the allocation. And that would be our point of comparison to PG. And so that's sort of this point. The comparison is we compare ourselves on renewables, and we compare ourselves on renewables to PG&E, and then our total power content is a function of our renewables purchases plus the allocation. If you accept the large hydro and the nuclear allocation plus the renewables that we buy, our expectation is that would leave us 5% cleaner than PG&E. If you do not accept the nuclear, then you're comparing yourself to a PG&E that includes nuclear, then you're not going to have the same level of carbon free. But if you compare yourself to PG&E just on the basis of their renewables and large hydro, then you're still cleaner because.
Hey Nick, this is Mary. I want to interrupt for a second, mainly because I think Jane asked where would the remaining 20 million come up from the
right. So I wanted to. I get that. So I was going to get to that point, but I just wanted to clarify that. Where does the additional 20 million come from? So the additional 20 million comes in part from other budget cuts that we're considering. So those are cuts to overhead, reductions or slowing in future hiring, reduced expense, overhead expense, looking at, our programs budget, are there reductions that we have to pursue there? And to the maximum degree, we're getting our cuts as far as we can get them, and then trying to make up any difference in looking at our discount, is there any modification to our value proposition that has to be made? And then anything that's left in the deficit would have to be funded out of reserves.
Okay.
On
Any
the,
other questions?
yeah, on the third column, the status quo, there's still a 2. I gotta move things out of my screen. There's still a $2.7 million saving projection. Why would there be savings still under the status quo? Can you explain where that savings is coming from?
Yeah, so that savings is if you're at 85% and you accept the large hydro, I think that's what you're referring to. We're accepting the large hydro. So it's a reduction in having to go out and procure large hydro because you're accepting an allocation of the large hydro.
Right. So basically, you're getting it at a cost without at basically the cost of like a brown energy, and you're getting the large hydro attribute on top for free. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Well, I think that like similar to other comments today, you know, it seems that this item needs a lot more discussion. I, for one, would really like to see this, you know, the $30 million budget deficit, you know, better articulated and explained, you know, how that's been approached and what are all the other cuts that are, I think, similar to Monica's comments, to really understand what the trade-off is here. You know, I think like others in the community, I also, you know, representing both, you know, kind of my own company and, you know, I think others in our industry, we would be very much opposed to introducing nuclear into the community choice power mix here in Alameda County. You know, so I think at this point, I would be in favor of having more discussion on this item, really fleshing out what are the other options for making up this deficit. And definitely, you know, at a minimum on Wednesday, encouraging the board to move this to a discussion item rather than an action item in the near term, so that the public and the board and the CAC can all, you know, have a chance to discuss this further with staff.
Great. Thank you, Jane. Rick, do you have any comments?
I don't. Thanks, Mary. I think everyone asked good
All right.
questions.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. My one question to Nick is timing. I think that I do remember discussion of changing the power content coming up in previous meetings as one option, perhaps to take. Can you please explain the timing of this and what would occur, if anything, if this item were not acted upon, and therefore the other action item may not be able to be acted upon if this were not in place in terms of nuclear? Maybe they could be independent.
Yes. So the timing is that we are about 35% of our way through the calendar year. And, you know, we have to make procurement decisions now for the rest of the year. And the longer we wait, so we had intended to bring this forward in March. That meeting was canceled, so we are bringing it forward here. The longer we wait and not making an adjustment, either we have to go and we lose the opportunity for savings because we go out and we buy more carbon free, or we wait and then there's the risk that if the guidelines are not changed and we maintain the guidelines, then we have less time to fill our positions and we're susceptible to higher prices. So this is really a pretty timely item to be able to support you know, our procurement strategy for the rest of this calendar year. So that's the driver of the timeline as opposed to say waiting until June or July or August or what have you. The longer you wait, the less ability you have to adjust your procurement planning.
And if we waited until May, would it, if a decision were able to be made in May, would that, I understand it's pushing out for procurement. Is that, I don't have a sense of whether or not waiting till May would really perhaps cause you to be susceptible to higher costs if you were to go have to procure this, if the choice was to keep the 85%.
Yeah, you know, every thing, you know, it's a function of days, right? So if we wait another month, we have 30 less days to go out and implement the strategy that we are going to you know, have in place for ourselves. So you know, it's not an answer that's like definitively yes or no. It's just that, you know, the longer we wait, the higher the risk is that we're susceptible to scarcity. So that's, you know, unfortunately, there's not a single answer of yes, we have to do it now, or no, it's okay that we wait. You know, there's a kind of a continuum.
Okay, great, thank you. I know for myself, what I've heard from the board are, or from our committee, are simply some questions around what this is and how this money would be used. I think that amelioration of the deficit seems to be something that is positive, at least to me. I haven't heard anybody say that it's not good to reduce the deficit. I think that there were, Anna Olivia, I know that you asked several questions around this and really wanted to separate this. I think my comment is I do feel like some of this is being conflated between the two, and I think that they do go hand in hand. I do feel that it is appropriate for staff to look for ways to save the budget. I mean, I think that's your job, is to ensure that we are a viable institution. So I do think that this is one way and a positive step to save the budget. However, what our task is as a CAC is to kind of provide advice to the board. Given what we just heard from Nick about the timing and the susceptibility to higher costs, if the procurement choice is not made, and some of these other things here, I guess I don't feel like I have a clear hearing from everybody. I can definitely pass on to the board that if possible, it seems like it would be better to push this off until an action in May. I know, Cynthia, you definitely said that. Anna Olivia, I think you said that as well. So as a CAC, what do you want to tell the board?
I'd be willing to put forward a motion to, you know, a motion to ask the board to move this from a action item to a discussion item on Wednesday night to allow more time for public comment and discussion.
Can we make a friendly amendment to that or something? Also, is it okay if we stop with the screen share on this particular slide so that we can see the participants' faces again? That'd be cool.
No.
Great, thank you so much. So I think that I would like it if Chair Sutter or Vice Chair Frank made a, like, these are the concerns that were raised. It doesn't feel like an appropriate time to be making a decision, but absolutely provide the board guidance on the area issues of concern very clearly. This is recorded and live now, so we should be able to review it this evening. I would be happy to help you put that together. And I wanted to get one more clarification, even if he doesn't answer it during this meeting. I would like Nick to, sorry, we're in the middle of a motion, so I'll ask that at the end. So I would say, instead of just saying, don't make a decision on this right now, be due to the financial impetus, to clearly state these being the issues and the need for proper process in evaluating these things.
Mary, I would like to add something if, whenever I can come in.
Yep.
What I would like to see also, I don't know if it would be in this motion or not. I know that Ms. French mentioned it. I would like to see the staff provide some analysis on how the deficit could be reduced without purchasing nuclear energy. Like I know there was some reference to, slowing the growth of the agency, but where could they possibly close the deficit if we didn't purchase nuclear energy, please?
Great, thank you. It is outside of this motion. I think that is not this item, and so I don't feel like we need to have to put it here. And I think, as with all motions that we have, it doesn't have to be exact wordsmithing, but essentially, Monica, do you have specific concerns that you feel need to be brought forward, or do you have another point?
Yeah, I just had another point. I kind of lost track of what this motion was, but I think in addition to providing, I guess, areas of concern, we should also put forward perhaps things that we do support in the proposal. Like we support the concept of saving money to avoid having to raise rates or dip into reserves and not be able to get a credit rating in the future. Or we support the idea of having a certain standard of RPS above PG&E's. Maybe there's something that we can also put forward that's productive in helping the board when they're looking at this, as opposed to what we don't like.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right.
Those
right now
are friendly. I'll second it.
All right. So we have a motion, a friendly amendment, a second friendly amendment, and a second on that.
Can we repeat the motion?
I will. The motion, and again, I am not a big stickler on the wordsmithing, but this is what I have down, is that we will move that this item, our recommendation is to move this item from an action item to an informational item during the Wednesday meeting. And these are the areas of concern raised. And I need to get a couple of those in parentheses. I don't have those quite yet. And there's a need for proper process in evaluating this issue. However, we do support the specific standard above RPS and reducing the deficit.
It might be a separate thing, but like one other thing that's, I don't know if we should discuss it is, if I think it's part of like looking at this, the budget and where we can realize cost savings. And I just think it's premature to decide now whether giving up that 85% is a decision we need to make until we actually see, what's going on with the budget. Because we could agree to these guidelines and then not take the allocation, and essentially we'd have a dirtier mix. But we wouldn't be supporting nuclear. And again, it's without seeing the trade-offs and the budget, it's very, very difficult to have any kind of grounding or basis to say, what would be better or worse.
I have that, and I think that is one of the areas of concern.
Yeah.
I would include it. It's not talking about that. So we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. Unless there's additional discussion, I would like to call a vote so we can move on to our next item, which is also contentious.
I do have a specific request for staff's presentation of this item to the board on Wednesday. I'd like to see a physical, or at least written out, what the power content labels would look like between the three products, because it was said that just because that is unclear in the presentation, and then at the end, CEO Chasset said that it would not all get dumped on Bright Choice. So if it could be demonstrated in what the power content tables would look like, that would be really helpful. Also, I'll follow up with some questions. There's a
Annalee, just so I'm clear about the request. So in the presentation, I think what we tried to demonstrate kind of a comparison power content between the power content guidelines, the status quo, and with and without nuclear. You would like us to also add in a comparison of Brilliant 100, where it would demonstrate, you know, the amount of allocation and the amount of nuclear?
Well, no. So what was said in response to my question about the allocation of nuclear power only to Bright Choice was that it wouldn't all get dumped on the lower income or low cost product that we offer. And so since it did look like it was all going to end up in that rate class, that or in that product offering, if you could demonstrate that this is what Bright Choice would look like, and this is how it is shared with Brilliant 100, probably not the renewable because it doesn't qualify as a renewable. So showing that it isn't just going on to people who can't afford to opt up would be helpful, because that was one of the concerns that was raised the last time it was heard at the board meeting.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor.
I believe we
I'd like
actually
to call a vote.
speak to that in the next presentation. So that I think that question is addressed.
But this item
Thank
happens
you.
before that one. Okay.
It's also just a quick note in the note on the slide 5 that Bright Choice is getting its pro rata share of the total EBC allocations, whether that's just hydro or hydro nuclear, and the remainder of the total EBC allocations would go to Brilliant 100. You're right that nothing would go to Renewable 100 because it's only renewable.
Thank you.
All right, one last time. I want to take a vote on this motion. So all in favor of a motion where I will bring forward to the board that the CAC advises that the board move this item from an action item to an informational item, and that because there are areas of concern raised, an example being premature to reduce 85% when we don't know the other options available to us, and there's a need for proper process in evaluating this issue. However, we do support specific standard above the RPS and reducing the deficit. All in favor? And because I can't see everybody, can we have a voice? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, great. That's what I will be presenting to the board on Wednesday. And we're going to move on to item C6. This is the PG&E carbon-free allocations. We had 50 minutes for this. We now have about a half an hour left in our meeting. I'm going to kind of let things move forward, but ask that the staff kind of move through their presentation pretty quickly. I feel like the CAC has made itself pretty darn clear in terms of whether or not they support the nuclear allocation or not. But I think that one of the things that is really important that seemed to have come out new, and I hope that staff will spend some time on this, is that choices made this year may affect allocation options in subsequent years. So who's planning to present on this to us? Who's presenting? Nick, are you presenting? Is Todd presenting?
Alex is presenting. Do we still have Alex? If not, I can present. If we want to start it off. I've lost connection to the Zoom, so I can't see anything. So if you want to bear with me for a second.
Alex is on as an attendee. If you want to promote him to panelist, that would probably fix it.
I just promoted him to panelist.
Alex, are you on? Can you hear us?
Alex should be rejoining us now.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? This is Alex.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Alex, we can. Go ahead. Yep.
Great. Well, good evening. I realize that we've already discussed some of this subject matter, so I'll do my best to run through it as quickly as possible. That being the case, I think, Mary, unless you prefer otherwise, I can go straight to the next slide, or I can.
I think, given our time, I think that the next slide, or even highlights from item 4. I think slide 5 is interesting, and then get, I think, straight to some of the allocations would be
okay.
useful.
Well, the second slide or slide 3 is detailing the periods at which we've discussed this item before. I know everyone who's on this call has probably participated in these previous meetings, but we wanted to lay out the sequence of discussions that this item has received since November of last year. As far as the allocation process is concerned, I'd focus people's attention on period B, since that's more likely going to be the scenario in which the board would have to consider. Are there any questions about the allocation process that we can help address? If not, we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So as far as what other CCAs in PG&E service area have decided, here's a up-to-date summary of what has been decided. As you can see, several CCAs have accepted both the hydro and the nuclear portions of the allocation, and some CCAs have decided only to accept the hydro, at least for this year. I know that some, including MCE, have kept the option open on nuclear for the future. But this gives some important context that didn't exist before. Are there any questions about this? Okay, thank you.
Nope.
I have just one question. In terms of load, is there a way to look at this this same graph and with an added column representing like either number of ratepayers or total load?
That would be a challenge, given that several, if not most, of these CCAs are in the process of growing. I guess it would be possible if you were looking retrospectively, but that won't really be telling the full story.
Can I ask a question, Alex?
It's fine with me if it's okay with Mary.
Yes.
Yep. Go for it, Susan.
I don't see San Francisco clean power here. Did I miss it somewhere?
No, and unless someone else has information on their decision around this issue, I'm not sure what Clean Power SF has decided to date.
Okay.
Not everybody's
This
made
is
a
Nick.
choice.
I'm not aware of their decision. It has not been reported to me, so I actually don't know what they've done.
Since no allocation has necessarily been offered, it doesn't mean that they won't make a decision, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you, Cynthia. Okay, can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, again, the process as we've discussed. And again, the procurement floor decision is an important consideration because it presents a question of whether or not we're going to be comparing apples to apples when compared to PG&E. or whether we should be just focusing on renewable as opposed to carbon free. Next slide, please. Unless there are questions.
Can you explain them just a little bit?
The process?
No, sorry, it was going very fast. Go to the next slide.
Okay. The scenario in which EDCE would accept both the hydro and the nuclear portion of the carbon-free allocation is as such. And again, we've illustrated this in terms of whether or not the procurement floor is approved or not. What the savings are, et cetera. To me,
this is Nick. Let me just interject on this particular point. I think that what we're illustrating here is that if the procurement floor modification is made, that the financial consequences of accepting or not accepting the nuclear allocation are significantly diminished, because you're not going to, if you do not accept the nuclear allocation, then you're not going and replacing that nuclear allocation with procured large hydro. So that's the point, is that if you don't modify the procurement guidelines and you don't accept nuclear, you have to fill that 23.3% of your power mix with procured large hydro, which has a projected cost of $8.6 million.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, because for the general public, and by that I mean folks who are outside of these meetings, they're not necessarily as informed of the difference between carbon-free and renewable, and it puts us it puts EDCE and other CCAs at a disadvantage when the focus is on carbon-free, if nuclear is integrated within the carbon-free category. Whereas with renewable, you can remove the nuclear factor out of the equation, and it's a much more fair comparison.
But on this side, you
Hey,
have
hey,
the
Alex,
price.
Alex, can you move on to slide 9? I think slides 7 and 8 introduce numbers that have, or 6, 7, and 8, or at least 7 and 8 introduce numbers that are not as meaningful when you compare options A and B. And slide 9 and 10 say, if you choose item A and you accept it, you're going to get this, and then you have 2 other choices to make, and then and tells the other one, and that's where the bottom line numbers are starting to show up. That it wasn't, when I reviewed these, it wasn't until I got to slide 9 that I went, oh, I had no idea what that 2.7 and 8.6 was coming to, because by the time you compare it, they don't really show up. So you might want to consider, when you present this to the board on Wednesday, kind of skipping over those, if I understand it correctly, and moving to slide 9 and then 10.
Okay, thank you for the feedback, Mary. And I should say that even though we're discussing a portion of a year this year in 2020, this option will likely return in the coming years. So which is why it's of value to look at this on an annual basis, or what the savings could be annually.
Okay. So I guess go ahead and I know what my question is, but I think I'm sorry to interrupt your flow of the presentation, and so perhaps you could continue with the presentation, and then we can get public comment, and then we can ask our questions.
Sure. Well, if there aren't questions on this slide, I'm happy to move on, because I know there are questions.
We're hoping that the slides that she asked about answer some of the questions, so we're just waiting for you.
Sorry, on slide 10 or slide 9?
Go ahead and start on 9.
Okay, well, under option A, you can see that what the total procurement savings are, and you can see what the content is of nuclear, hydro, renewable, etc. And then option B.
And this is
Again,
Vanessa.
whether
Sorry,
we're-
real quick.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, just to be clear, and hopefully this is clear, that these are the same numbers that are presented in the previous item.
Yeah.
But looking, option A, Mary, you're right. Those points are just strictly to highlight what option A and option B entail in terms of how much of the allocation would be here. But the meat of the decision comes down to these slides and looking at the comparison.
Do you cover the power content for Brilliant 100 in this? And if they're not in the slides, can you please add them while you're presenting?
Power content for Brilliant 100 is not included in here. It will remain 100% carbon free, but there would be a nuclear percentage if that's what you're referring to.
I'd just like to see it because you have it broken out for Right Choice. So.
Right. Yeah, because there are more moving parts in Right Choice, but thank you for the fact.
Yeah, Olivia, that's great because it really gets to the crux of the issue, which is, does carbon-free include nuclear or not? Are we going to be comparing carbon-free power content or renewable power content? That's really the crux of the question, I think. So if we can move on.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead and go to slide 10.
Okay, so again, this is if the power content guidelines are not adjusted, I think it's fairly self-explanatory.
Perhaps you could explain it for the people on the phones though, because not everyone can see the screens.
Would you like me to read the slide? I'm trying to get to the people's questions as fast as possible. Mary, what would you prefer?
I tell you what, I'll just do a real quick summary. Slide 10 describes the option A and B of including nuclear and hydro or not, and whether or not the choice was made. In slide 10, the choice has been made supposedly, or perhaps by the board, to not adjust power content. So you stay at 85%. The total procurement savings, if you include nuclear, is 10.2 million. If you do not include nuclear, 3.2. The difference being, if you go back one more slide, if you go back to the previous slide where the board has chosen to reduce the power content, the savings are 12.9 if you include nuclear and 11.8 if you do not. So I think the important point there is that 11.8 is very close to the 11.3 and there's no nuclear. And that's only if they take the rate choice or the change that we were talking about just previously. So it ranges from 3.2 to 12.9 million between the two choices that they have to make. Do I have that right, Alex?
Yeah.
Okay. So I know that folks on the phone, I would like to kind of, the one thing I would like to hear, because I think people will ask this, is the choice appears to have been made somewhere along the lines, and that this particular item also says if they make this choice now for the allocation, it will stay in place in the future. And my question for you is whether or not this resolution has been stated, because we don't have it in the presentation, and does that resolution indicate that the choice will be made here and be the same in future years? So if staff could answer that, and then I'd like to open it up to the public.
Yes, we are making the decision around accepting the allocation for this year, and the resolution would, keep that allocation decision in place through the term of the allocations.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie, Adrian, do we have public comment on this one? I think you said that we do have a few folks. And for those in the public, if you can keep some of your discussions short, then we'll get out of here closer to 9. If not, we'll just be here a little later. Totally up to
We
you
have
guys.
3 speakers, Barbara Stebbins, Audrey Ichinose, and Jessica Tabar. They can please raise their hands.
Great. Why don't you, Barbara, are you available?
Thank you. Yeah,
Oh.
thanks. I don't see where to raise a hand anymore. I did before, but I don't now. Yeah, I mean, I think the arguments, we have made arguments against accepting nuclear that is the most important to us, which really have to do with the fact that nuclear is dangerous, dirty, and has a long history of environmental racism as well. And so the idea that the majority of any nuclear we took would then be foisted onto low-income people is a real, that is certainly a problem for us and the allied organizations that we work with. There's a couple of things that I would really like to point out. If you look at the bottom of slide 4, look quick at the bottom of slide 4. It says very clearly, if the board votes to accept nuclear on Wednesday, April 22nd, that staff will assume that that means they will accept nuclear in the years going forward. So it is a blank check to the staff to accept nuclear for all the years going forward. The other thing I'd like to point out is that at least in the CEO's report, it does mention that the savings mentioned here would be half for 2020 because half of the year has expired. So I realized it was an answer that compared fiscal year with calendar year, but the allotment that was originally in the advice letter expires on December 31st. So we would get at most probably June through December for this year. So I'll just make those 2 points.
Thank you, Barbara. Who's the next speaker? Do we have Audrey? Is that who you said, Stephanie?
Yes. This is Audrey.
Hi, Audrey.
Thank you. I hadn't submitted a speaker card for this, but since you called on me, I will say that I am preparing a comment that I will ask the clerk to circulate to the board members as well as staff and maybe CAC members. And that concerns early closure of Diablo Canyon. And I concentrate on the financial aspect of it. And I want to make a case that I think staff is unnecessarily pessimistic about the chances of getting an earlier closure of Diablo. And so, that would really help us a whole lot, CIA and the budget deficit. So please look out for this statement that I'm going to have circulated. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you, Audrey. So Stephanie or Adrian, do we actually have another speaker? And so who?
We have Jessica. I'll meet her now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi,
Okay,
Jessica.
great. Yes, so East Bay Clean Power Alliance submitted a letter today, an amended letter that included about 60 or so organizations that are part of the East Bay Clean Power Alliance. In addition, we have a petition with about, I think the last time I looked was like 372 signatures from folks that are against nuclear energy in East Bay Community Energy and support the closure of Diablo Canyon, the last nuclear power plant in California, noting that San Onofre is currently in decommissioning because of a leak and concerns around seismic and safety issues. It's time to put nuclear to rest. We should have learned from our mistakes of bad energy choices. We established East Bay Community Energy and a commitment to local clean energy because we know that the clean energy future that we need needs to be solar, wind, battery storage, and all the different programs that make up the local development business plan. It's time that we transition and really make this Green New Deal happen in our local community and not repeat the bad choices and environmental disastrous decisions that have brought us to this point where we're at. Let me just remind folks that pandemics are the result of ecological collapse that we have contributed to, okay? In addition, climate catastrophe that we are also inundated with, wildfires, the pollution. There's so much more that is at stake. Now is the time to put an end to these bad decisions, energy decisions. Let PG&E stay with it. They can't meet their RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standard. Oh, well, it's time for us to show them that we're cleaner and that we can do better. That's all.
Thank you, Jessica. Do we have any other speakers?
No, there are no more speakers.
No.
Oh, wait, I
Okay.
filled out a card. This is Al.
Oh, hi, Al. Go ahead.
And that's the A. Sorry about that. Audrey got in for yours.
Oh, okay.
Go, Al.
Yeah, thank you a lot. You all did see the fact sheet that the State Clean Power Alliance put out, largely to clarify a lot of misinformation that was being provided to the board and to us about what this offer was really about. Something that continues to confuse people between whether the energy is free or the allocation is free, or push forward the notion that because of the high PCIA, people have essentially already paid for the nuclear, and that's why it's free. These are all really, really, deceptive kinds of presentations. I want to mostly talk about why PG&E wants to make sure that they dump their nuclear power on community choice programs, because this is something that hasn't been talked about at all. We all know that because of the departing load of community choice programs from PG&E, that it has to sell all its nuclear power to its own customers, the bundled customers. That percentage of power of nuclear in their portfolio is already, I think, somewhere around 40%. It's going to continue to increase as people leave to go to more community choice programs. PG&E is suddenly saddled with 50, 60, 70% of its power coming from only one place, which is already a very shaky situation. But secondly, it would be then forced to sell all that power that if it wanted to keep its nuclear power content lower out on the open market. And there is no real market for that community choice except in other states and whatnot. Basically, we know that PG&E has about $1 billion a year currently in above market costs for that energy. That's only guaranteed because it's able to sell that energy in California to its own customers. And what this offer is all about is really dumping that excess nuclear power onto community choice customers so it can continue to reap the profits from this very highly overpriced energy production. So essentially what we do by taking this power as we continue being captured by these huge PCIA costs, which PG&E pushed down on us and the other utilities, and by bailing out PG&E for a very difficult situation that it would have if it had to saddle all its own customers with its nuclear power production. So essentially, we are the losers, PG&E is the big gainers, and all of this is pushed on us by PG&E, who has been very unsympathetic and hostile to the success of community choice.
Thank you, Al. All right, I want to open it up to the CAC. Any comments from folks? I will remind everybody that we did recommend that no nuclear be accepted. Gosh, I think it was in February. I have to go back. I don't know if it was in January or February, but the CAC did recommend that. We had some other discussions, but we did make that recommendation in the past. So,
I think it was January.
I don't see the hand. Okay, Anna Olivia and then Monica.
I just,
and Jane.
We submitted questions to staff, and I had prepared them from the January responses. I presented them orally in February. Staff requested that I put them in writing so that they could respond in writing, and then we reminded them again last week. They were in February. We do recognize that this month has been totally bonkers and that everyone is trying to function in a highly stressful situation at home and professionally. It was 2 months ago. And so I was supposed to get those responses, as was the rest of the CAC and the public. And then they weren't prepared in writing. And then I was told that they would be gone through. It is 8:57. And they were supposed to be answered in this meeting. Those were questions compiled from the entirety of the CAC. They were technical. They addressed the concerns that are being brought up by the community and the board. And I would like to know where those answers are, because that is information. Like, we are a panel of experts. We are supposed to inform our board about areas that they should be considering. And I guess I just would like to know where those answers are and if they could be covered now.
Thank you, Anna Olivia. You know, I think the information we provide in the presentation, from our perspective, kind of covers the information that we can, provide at this point. We did answer at our February board meeting. There was an extensive sort of discussion of a lot of very specific questions. So I think the information we presented previously and today is the information that we feel we're able to present on this topic at this time.
They're very specific questions, and even, what was it, yesterday or the day before, we were told that they would be answered in this meeting. The questions that I have, well, some of them have been alluded to. They have not been answered or addressed, and definitely not directly.
I think there might have been a miscommunication earlier this week about what would be presented tonight. I think what we've been presented tonight is sort of what we're able to present on the topic. If there's anything that hasn't been covered in this presentation that specifically or hasn't been covered previously, certainly we can answer those questions that you may have, but
yes, absolutely. I can forward them again now if you would like.
Sure, ask the questions now. Todd or myself can help try to answer any questions that remain unanswered.
Okay, Jerry.
You're gonna try and field those verbally at this time? Like, you don't have answers?
I don't know what, I'm not sure which questions remain unanswered at this point. So which questions have not been answered or have not been clarified?
There are several. Let me pull them up. I was exact wording was requested, so I will pull up the exact wording because it was very carefully worked on. the questions that were distributed on February 19th. So the original question I submitted asked what the cost of the product was. Staff's response clarified a key element, incremental cost. I will skip the explanation there, but it is important. The answer did not answer the question directly. The response indicated that there is an actual cost not covered by the PCIA, that the power itself is not free, just the carbon-free attributes part is free. This indicates at least a cost parity to the cost of power purchased on the wholesale market or the cost of natural gas. So is there a positive finite cost, a non-zero cost for the power from Diablo Canyon and the hydropower allocation even? And we understand that there's not an incremental cost, even if that requires purchasing that power, the nuclear then is just put into the CAISO grid and then we purchase that power from the CAISO grid. What is there a non-zero sum cost?
Todd, would you like to answer?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at it. Hey, Anna Olivia. I think the answer is no. There are a bunch of different costs being tossed around. So there's the cost of Diablo, which is recovered through the PCIA eligible resource. That cost is offset by a variety of other either revenue sources or imputed valuations. With respect to this particular power, as Nick said earlier, all of the power PG&E is selling is sunk to the CAISO. All the power that we're taking out is purchased from the CAISO. So all the costs from PG&E's perspective are either recovered through the PCIA or from the CAISO. I mean, that's...
So I think that the simple answer is there's no cost to EBCE of this power because the costs are covered through CAISO or the PCIA.
So, but the PCIA captures the cost above the market value of creating it. So the capture, the power, the cost, this is very much why I wanted, why I supported staff's recommendation that this be done in writing with time to evaluate, especially if we're going with exact words. So the PCIA captures everything but the cost of the power. It's the itself, because it's all the extra costs above market costs that are captured inside of that PCIA. I do hear that we have to purchase the power from the grid, but we're getting...
Wait, let me pause for a second, back up. The PCIA captures all the costs, period, full stop, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But what you're calling costs are actually credits that offset the costs. So when PG&E gets money out of the market, that's offsetting the cost. There's a PCIA rate. The PCIA rate is just the above market cost. The PCIA rate is set after you do that netting of the revenues or the imputed values from the cost. So there's a PCIA rate that's different than the PCIA costs. So the costs include everything, right? All, you know, whatever it is they spend on Diablo, apart from like decommissioning, but for the actual operation of the thing, the capital costs. So all of that gets dropped into the PCIA bucket, all of the costs. There's an offset, and that results in the PCIA rate. So the rate is just the above market, right? But the costs are all going into the PCIA bucket at the front end. So in terms of kind of getting the semantics clear here, the rate is the above market piece.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I will examine that wording as carefully as I can later. Just to kind of run through as much as I can, the MCE's technical committee item on GHG free allocation in February outlined a couple issues that their staff identified as potential issues, and I just wanted to know what our staff thought about these things. The quote is, unlike the interim proposal, allocations not accepted by an LSE under the PCIA proposal would be reallocated automatically among LSE participating in the allocation of that category or resources and not simply return to the IOU. Allocations would continue for as long as the underlying assets are in the PCIA mechanism, but LSEs could opt in or out each year by a certain deadline. That does sound like, at least without direct board action, that would not happen. But attributes would be tradable or available for sale after received by an LSE with no further involvement of the IOU. The next section, uncertainty in the market. I just wanted to get y'all's take on those things because those felt like really important issues, especially when we know that certain CCAs have not accepted the allocation. And so what would you, like the original amount that was said to be allotted to us, it would be greater if that moves forward. But we don't actually even have the final proposal yet, do we? Do we know what our allocation would be?
No, we won't know what the allocation is until they actually make it, which will be sometime after the PUC votes out the advice letter on the 7th. I can step through at least the first part of what you were, I think, quoting from MCE, if you want me to tell you about that.
Sure.
So what that's referring to, that's doing a comparison between the interim allocation methodology, which is what's in the advice letter, the proposal that was made jointly by CalCCA, Southern California Edison, and Commercial Energy, which is a ESP, direct access provider, in the PCA preceding Working Group 3. So the reason this methodology is called the interim methodology is because it's supposed to be superseded by whatever comes out of this Working Group 3 process. And what MCE's paper there is talking about is the differences between, one of the differences between the allocation methodology that was proposed by that group in Working Group 3 and the interim methodology. And the specific difference that they were talking about is what happens with chunks of allocation that offerees decline. So if somebody says, no, I don't want my allocation, what happens to that slug of GHG free? And there is a difference between what emerged from the Working Group 3 process and is in that joint proposal and what's here in the interim proposal. And the difference specifically is that in Working Group 3, if folks turn down an allocation, it gets split up and divvied up again amongst those who accepted it, whereas in the interim allocation, it just goes back to PG&E. So that's what that's talking about. And that's a point that we kind of said, all right, fine, just to move things forward. And it's part of why we've been very clear that what's happening here is non-precedential with respect to what comes out of Working Group 3. You know, there's some differences. It just means there's kind of less to go around with the interim proposal than with the Working Group 3 proposal. On the plus side, it means that if you don't take nuke, you won't end up with nuke being reoffered to you again, which is kind of what happened with the Working Group 3 proposal. So that's what that's talking about.
I do understand what it is. I was wondering your take on it. Is it possible for a staff member to go through some of these things so that I can provide an analysis, especially when I'm looking at kind of the discrepancies between here and the information that I gathered, but would want to sit down. I actually tend to be more conservative on these things. I want to make sure that the numbers that I'm looking at either don't align or that I understand where the calculations are going differently. Is there a way that I could speak with a staff tomorrow to make sure I understand this prior to the board meeting?
Yes, absolutely. We'll set you up. Todd or Alex will follow up to schedule something.
Great, thank you.
Which numbers are you concerned with, Olivia? I'm not sure I'm the right person necessarily.
There's a lot of them. I mean, I submitted a full document. I narrowed it down to 3 pages, and that included explanations so that the public would understand what it was that was being asked. And it's been 2 months. These are important things to be looking at in order to appropriately inform the board And I was informed again that we would go through these things during this meeting. And I don't feel equipped to make a really thoughtful and thorough analysis for me to say like, okay, I feel good about this. So I will go through it. I will stay up tonight if necessary, or take a time out of my workday tomorrow, and make sure that the things that I'm asking of your time are thought out and thoughtful. So I can include y'all on the email, and whoever is appropriate can respond.
And Olivia,
I think that, well, perhaps what we can do is at the end of this meeting or early tomorrow, you can set up a call with Anna Olivia and Todd. You and Alex can both be on it. Anna Olivia and can present her questions to either of you.
I will say that I feel that the item being presented today is substantively distinct from the items that have been presented since November, not only in the ongoing nature of it, but in a variety of areas. There is still great uncertainty about what the actual details of what is being asked to be voted on. And if they're going to decide it on the 7th, then we should revisit this after that when there is adequate time to provide the information and the answers, as well as the actual proposal that we would be voting on, especially as this is so distinct from what has been said repeatedly in the past to the public and the board.
Okay, thank you, Anna Olivia. Are there anything else? Should we move on? Sounds like you muted yourself. Okay, Monica?
Yeah. Yep. I had a question, Mary, and then just make a couple of comments. So you said that the CEC recommended to the board that we not, yeah, the CAC recommended to the board that we not accept the nuclear allocation, but I don't remember we actually took action. I thought we had a lot of discussion, but we didn't actually take an action. I went through the minutes to see when the action was taken, and I can't seem to find that. It was in the same meeting where we had some nuclear advocates come talk, and I remember we went round and round, but we did not make a formal action on that, did we?
I think we did, Monica, because I recall making the motion.
I just went through the minutes of the February meeting and the January meeting, and there's no reported action. In fact, it says no action taken. You may want to go back and relook at that, because I don't think it's a accurate statement that we said we should decline the nuclear. In fact, I remember specifically saying that I'm not in a position right now to decline that. And so we had this convoluted of motion, I thought, that talked about all kinds of stuff, but we didn't actually take an action. So just that's one point. My second point is on the question of the 2020 interim allocation versus the authority, I'm sorry, somebody trying to say something? Oh, versus the authority that staff is asking for longer term allocations. And I guess I'm a little bit concerned, or just want to make sure that I understand that since the longer term allocations, that proposal and what that's going to be is still very much in flux right now. In fact, PG&E threw in a kind of a red herring into that whole discussion about what can be allocated and not be allocated, and suggested even that if the allocations were to happen, that if you accepted the large hydro and you accepted the nuclear, then you also had to accept natural gas. So my question or my comment or my concern is that if staff is given kind of an automatic, the board gives them an automatic, but if they approve this interim allocation, that it then goes on to longer term, that there be some mechanism for staff to come back and say, hey, the nature of what is being presented to us longer term is much different than what the interim allocation was. Either because there's this reallocation of nuclear should some of the CCAs reject it, or there's this imposition of having to take fossil fuel if you wanted to take the nuclear and the hydro. So that's one suggestion I would make. And then I'm still not clear, and I've read the staff report a couple of times, if staff is actually asking us to make a decision tonight. I see that there's two off proposals being made, the proposal A and proposal B, but is there a request that we accept one or the other tonight?
So our choice is to advise the board perhaps on one of these options, and they're planning to vote on it on Wednesday. They're planning to vote on an allocation on if they're going to take hydro, if they're going to take nuclear, and under the assumption that their choice that they made on Wednesday will be the choice in the future. And staff, if I have that wrong, please correct me.
That
is correct. Staff is presenting two options for the board. One option A is to accept the hydro and the nuclear allocation. Option B is to accept only the hydro allocation. That's the decision point for the board.
And along with that, Nick, is that, and this would carry over to the longer term allocations as well.
And so the staff the staff recommendation would be to then not require the staff come back to seek further acceptance of the allocation. I think the point you make, though, about material changes to the allocation process is something that was not is relevant here and is a point taken to sort of integrate into the staff presentation on Wednesday.
Great. And then maybe if somebody can actually confirm the statement that we voted to not accept it, I'd like to know when we did that.
It is. It was the December meeting. It was, we provided this information to the board on Wednesday, December 18th. So this was our December 16th meeting. And I can tell you the exact wording because this was one where we actually did spend some time. It says the CAC advises the board to reject nuclear allocations and also to seek clarification on several issues prior to making any choice. Specifically, the CAC has the following questions that would be beneficial for the board to explore. These questions cover risks, powers, and power content.
Okay.
So not everybody supported that. Well, so we, that was what we had, December 16th.
Yeah, so I guess just so that I don't have to come back and speak, as convoluted as this process is, I can guarantee you that it's not as bad. What they're presenting here is only a tip of the iceberg of how confusing this is, having to deal with this myself at my own CCA that I work for. It's a very complicated issue and they're tough decisions. It's a decision about saving money by avoiding paying for carbon-free resources versus changing rates and deferring programs and possibly even laying off staff. So those are tough decisions. And the reality is that the nuclear is going to flow. Anything we do here tonight is not going to change whether the nuclear flows or not. If for some reason the CPUC decides to decommission Diablo earlier, well then we just won't get the allocations. It's not like we're going to stop the decommissioning of a nuclear plant. So if it was put to a vote tonight, I would be in favor of option A, I think taking both nuclear and hydro with the purpose of saving the money, real money savings to the ratepayers of EBCE.
Okay. Jane, do you have any comments?
I don't really have much to add. I think from my perspective, I would be in favor of option B because I think as some of the public comment pointed to, I just feel, having nuclear in our mix is just not, why this project, this whole endeavor was embarked upon, or the kind of understanding that the community had in kind of putting forward EBCE to begin with, and I think that the harm of nuclear and kind of perpetuating that energy on the grid in any way whatsoever is just, you know, it's just far outweighs any benefit that I'm seeing at this point. And again, you know, I mean, I think there's obviously, I think I'm not disagreeing with Monica about the larger context around, you know, budgetary requirements and trade-offs, but I just don't see that information presented to us in a way, in a clear way that's making a irrefutable argument that we must take this now. And I also am really not comfortable with authorizing, you know, with a decision that, you know, authorizing a kind of a decision in perpetuity that, you know, would not be brought back and discussed again, particularly as when this was initially brought forth, it was brought forth as a one-time deal.
Cynthia, yeah, just a second, Anna Olivia. Cynthia, I had heard from you previously, and I put it down that you're not in favor and you remain opposed to inclusion of nuclear in all allocations. Do you have any other comments or thoughts that you'd like to make at this point?
Yeah, I was wondering whether this item on the Wednesday meeting, the Wednesday JPA meeting, I remain, you know, against nuclear and energy for the same reasons that Ms. French just said. I just think it goes against the vision of community choice, and also we could lose customers. I mean, there is, you know, I don't want to say this. There is an element of deception here. Well, from my point of view, you know, when they were kind of bringing in nuclear energy when initially we were, I thought as a group, opposed to it, along with coal. But that being said, I wonder if this item should be an informational item on Wednesday's meeting as well. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or should we just?
I'm going to put that to staff. My assumption is it's the same. I don't know about the timing of this, but my assumption is it has the same timeline as what we discussed in the previous one.
That's exactly my thinking. And go ahead.
Well, I guess I'll ask staff. Is the timing any different for this one than the previous one? Previous item. Nick, you're on mute, if so.
Yes. Our expectation is that we do need to provide an indication to the CPUC and PG&E of what we want to do in regards to the allocation in May. And we may, if we wait until the May meeting, we may miss our ability to make a determination to accept one or both allocations. So yes, we do need to vote on it.
Okay. I wonder if a motion is in order to accept option B.
Anna Olivia, and then Cynthia, I'd like to come back to you to see.
Okay.
Anna Olivia does have one more thing, and then I'd like to come back because I would like a motion on the floor so we can close this. Anna Olivia?
Nick, you said that what the actual decision, what the real offer was going to be decided at May 7th?
That is our expectation, that the PUC will make a determination on the advice letter or resolution at the May meeting. Todd, if I'm wrong, please step in though.
That's right. It's currently on the.
That sounded bonkers. So our normally scheduled first meeting of the month, which we often skip, is May 6th. If that meeting is, that information won't be public by then because they have to work it out on the 7th, right?
We do not have a regularly scheduled meeting for May 6th. And Stephanie, step in if that's not correct, but I believe we are no longer scheduling regularly scheduled meetings for the first Wednesday of the month this year.
That is correct. We're just scheduling the regular third meeting of the month. The third Wednesday of the month.
Well, it's possible that we might need to hold an additional meeting or something to go over this, but it really feels like we should know what that determination is before we vote on it, because when you said that you could bring it back if something was substantially different, it's substantially different from what? From the thing that we don't know yet? Or the thing that they decide? What if the, you know, I guess I'm still confused as to why we're doing this before an actual proposal is, or offer is on the table.
Hey, Nick, can you remind us how much time the LSEs have after the CPUC makes their decision to let PG&E know their choice?
Todd, will you refresh me on those specifics?
So there's an uncertain lag, probably a couple of days between the PSC and PG&E making the allocation, and then 30 days from the allocation to accept or decline.
Todd, you're kind of muffled. I heard that there's an uncertain lag, but then I didn't get a sense of if that's a day or two, a week or two, a month or two.
From what we've heard from PG&E, they're willing to make the allocation, you know, basically right on the heels of the meeting. That would mean a day or two later. Per the terms of the advice letter, there will be a 30-day window which will accept the allocation once it's made. PG&E has stated that formally that they're willing to start making the deliveries as quickly as we can accept or decline and allocate. Make deliveries in the case of accepting. They would make deliveries as soon as we accepted. They wouldn't wait out 30 days.
But we have 30 days to accept it?
But we don't want to take the 30 days.
Yeah, but you don't have to take it. And if you do, you want to accept, you've lost whatever gap was there.
Yeah, most of us have been preparing in advance of the decision. So as soon as the decision happens, we can turn around and make that confirmation with PG&E so we can start delivering like within 2 or 3 days. Because every day that we delay is a day that we have to buy carbon-free resources for, and we don't get to materialize those savings. So we want to be able to execute this as soon as the decision goes out.
Okay, so I'd like to come back to Cynthia. Cynthia, I think that you were starting to make a motion. Do you still want to put that forward?
Yes, if it doesn't complicate anything. I would like to move to accept the PG&E offer plan option B rather.
Okay. I have a friendly amendment to that, if you're willing.
Sure.
I would also like to put onto there that staff, that we recommend that staff come back to the board for future allocations if there are differences between what is being allocated now and what is being allocated in the future.
Absolutely.
I still feel like we need to say something about this. I don't like voting on it before we have a concrete offer. I will not block it. I'll support you in it.
Okay. Thank you, Anna Olivia. I'm writing here, and then I want to come back and ask everybody a question. So the motion at this point, as put forward and amended, is that the CAC would advise the board to accept option B of the allocations, and also, which is hydro only, no nuclear, and also that staff come back to the board for future allocations if there are material differences between the current allocation and future allocations. And my question to staff is the term material differences sufficient to really highlight what we're trying to say? Or can you think of other words that really help show what we mean? Todd, you're the lawyer. Are material differences, is that an okay term, or is there a more precise term that would be beneficial to use in our motion?
I'm not your lawyer. But
True.
I can say that I think we get the gist of it, right?
All right. That's all I needed to know.
The changes you want us to come back.
Okay.
That's right.
So we have a motion on the floor and an amendment. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Monica? Okay. So we have 4 in favor. Any abstentions? And Rick has dropped off, so he's no longer able to. Okay. I'm going to close this item. We are coming up on 9:30. Item C7 is any member or staff announcements, including anything that we want to place on future CAC agendas. Olivia?
I really want to recognize the incredibly hard work of staff and leadership in the COVID-19 response. The community grants have been making a serious and material difference in the lives of organizations working directly with communities who are being impacted in ways that we have previously unfathomed. I just really want to say thank you and express deep gratitude for the work that you're doing right now.
I second that. Any other announcements? Nope. We will adjourn to May 18th, Monday, May 18th. And at this point,
Thank you all very much.
We will be in touch in terms of whether or not it'll be virtual or in person. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Yep. Bye.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay.